Welcome back, students. Today we are going to start a new topic, and that is American literature. I have just uploaded a couple of videos on American novelists and poets as well, but today I have just decided to discuss some background of American literature with you guys. So, my today's discussion is based on a brief introduction of American literature. So, let's start our discussion. Introduction to American literature. American literature as world literature is, in one of its most basic senses, the literature written and published in the United States. So in the simplest sense of the term, rather better to say, the definition of the term is the body of literature that is being produced in USA, in America. It can be considered as American literature, particularly the literary bodies, the novels, dramas, poetry and short story and prose that is being published, or that are all these genres which are published in America. They can be considered as American literature. So that is the actual body of American literature. Although American literature is a newly flourished literature, but not as new as we have the post-colonial literature, and as we have the literature like when we say Pakistani literature in English or Pakistani Anglophone literature. So it's not that new, it's older than that. American literature has a small body of literary works as compared to the rest of the British literature. Yes, as compared to the British literature, it has a smaller body of literary works and literary compositions. Yet it is popular and is widely read across the world. It is also the part of international academia. Yes, in international academia, there is a specific module of American literature in the universities. Well, it offers some bright literary works created by the bright and shining literary figures of American literary paradigms. For example, Ernest Hemingway, Emily Dickinson, Robert Frost. So these are those shining stars, some of those shining stars of American literary paradigms. From its first imitative activities to innovative attempts nowadays, American literature gradually gains its unique style, themes, and forms, and works that reflect more and more America in its true sense. Well, let me explain this point. American literature isn't a simple literature, and it doesn't mean a simple term. Just like British literature, it had gone through a lot of phases, including the Puritanic phase, the Romantic phase, in reaching towards its in the journey of reaching towards its actual shape. American literature had also passed through a lot of stages. It evolved in different stages, just like British literature. Well, from Nathaniel Hawthorne and Edgar Allan Poe to Ernest Hemingway and Faulkner, American literature has a unique vibrancy, because when we say American literature, it means the literature or the body of literature or literary productions that are published or that are created in United States of America. So when we use this term United States of America, so it means that very literature reflects a lot of ideologies, a lot of the mindset, a lot of cultures of different nations, because America is based on states. So its literature is vibrant because it has an echo of different cultures and heritages in it. Like we have Anglo-American literature, we have Black American literature, we have Native American literature. So within American literature, there are several bodies of literature and literary creations. Critics of American literature normally categorizes it into 6 developmental phases. Well, I'm just going to highlight a few. For example, the Romantic phase. From Romantic primitive essence to its modern and more advanced and realistic and individualistic essence of the term, I'm going to discuss this small journey. Although it's not a small journey, but I am just going to briefly highlight things that are the part of these phases. Writers of early phases intended to imitate British style and themes. The very phase is known as the Romanticism of American literature. It was from 1800 and onwards till the early or end of the 1800. Okay. The writers of the time period were considered conformist and experimental because they were trying to make different experimentations with the form and with the we can say themes as well. For example, when we analyze the poetry of Emily Dickinson, we can find different sort of new punctuation schemes that were specifically used by Emily Dickinson in her poetry. It was a developmental phase of American literature. Well, it was a developmental phase of American English literature, American literature. Writers were intended to develop a national identity. In the later half of the century, writers of American literature and poets of American literature, they tried to develop a national identity of America through their literary creations. The next focus was on the cultural history and heritage of their land. Then there are some famous literary figures of American Romanticism. The representative literary figures of American Romanticism or Romanticism in American literature are Edgar Allan Poe, Nathaniel Hawthorne, Walt Whitman, Emily Dickinson, and Melville. Next was the time of the nation and writers towards the emergence of more and more freedom from the conventional paradigm. It was the time of early 20th century. Romantics of American literature had a great effect in their works because the literature produced by these figures like Edgar Allan Poe, Nathaniel Hawthorne, Emily Dickinson, Walt Whitman, that literature had a deeper feeling and it had a deep appeal as compared to the later generation or the literature of later generations, because it reflects the deep and dark sides of their cultural identity as well. So romantics of American literature had a great effect in their works as they tried to depict the darkness within their national culture on that time. So America wasn't like that as it sounds now or as we perceive it now. Same is the case with American literature. In short, American literature is not a single domain, but a series of literatures, a chain of multiple state voices, including the voice of their so-called savages that they were aimed to civilize in result of their Enlightenment project. Now, for this very aspect, we need a very, very different and separate discussion and a lecture. But if you want to probe deep into this statement, then you must see the some Native Americans' perspective on Columbus' discoveries from and I have mentioned the writers over here as well, and the poets Sherman Alexie and Gerald Wessner's Years of Columbus. So these are the writers and some of the works you can go through in order to understand the great discoveries of Columbus. What was the real side? What was the actual side of those? And what was the dark side of those discoveries? So what was the effect of those discoveries on the natives of the American lands? those natives, the Spaniards and the rest of the European settlers, they considered them savages and cannibals, because nowadays we consider them Native Americans, and in the past times we just considered them the Red Indians. So it was the term actually Columbus assigned to them, the Red Indians, because Columbus, when he started his journey, he aimed to reach to the Indian lands in order to search for the gold. But in fact, due to some misunderstanding of their route, of their journey, they had to stay. They had to just yes, stay over there in the land where the people were just a bit tan, and they had red and tan complexion. So on the basis of that complexion, Columbus just identified them as Red Indians. So those Red Indians, now they have a separate body of literature, and that is known as Native American literatures. And these writers and poets I have mentioned over there, they are the Native American writers. Well, the other side is the side of the European settlers. They have just shown us in their literary creations, and particularly in the literature of Fanny Moore Cooper, who was in the later 18th century, was a part of American literary paradigms. And in his works, he just reflected the very dark side of Native American culture and Native American people as well, and particularly he just portrayed them as savages. So his works are also greatly significant in order to understand that side of American culture and American people. So Fanny Moore Cooper's works are greatly significant in order to understand the attitudes of Spaniards and of the rest of the European settlers and nations that settled down in the United States of America towards the actual people of that land, towards the Native Americans. Well, new millennium in American literature is actually brighter than the past generations of American literature. In the 20th century and onwards of American literature, there is a branch known as Native American literature. Yeah, now they have given a voice to the Black Americans as well as the Native Americans. So because it's an established democratic state now, so America as United States voices in almost all of the literary productions of American origin, either by natives or by the settlers of this land, and even by the Black Afro-American writers as well. Like we have the writer of Jazz and Beloved, her name is Toni Morrison. This is what actually gives birth to the idea of American dream. Yeah, American dream is a separate concept, and the very bright side of that dream is that concept of American dream is that America is meant for everyone to progress. Well, the drawbacks and the dark sides of this very American dream can be found in the 20th century literature, particularly the literature produced by F. Scott Fitzgerald, and in his novel The Great Gatsby. You can find the very aspect of American dream and the dark sides of American dream. So this was all about a brief introduction of American literature and American Native American literature, and rather it was a brief introduction of American literatures. So thank you so much for today. See you in the next video with the new domains of discussion on American literature, inshallah, or with some new topic. Don't forget to subscribe my YouTube channel English Literature on a Click. Thank you so much, and try to share this channel with your fellows and with your students as well. And don't forget to subscribe it, and please try to press the bell icon as well, so that you can get the recent updates from this channel. Thank you so much. Allah Hafiz.